My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 58 years old. I live in Thompson Station, Tennessee, just outside Franklin, in a little three-bedroom house off Buttermilk Ridge Road. And the night this story really begins, my wife told me to go ask our daughter for money. Our daughter, a fourth-grade school teacher, while our son had $12 million sitting in a bank account with his name on it. That's the kind of sentence that sits in your chest like a rock you swallowed whole. I didn't say anything back to Diane that night. I just sat there at my own kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of me and let it settle into me, the way cold settles into old floorboards. But before I tell you the rest of this, I want you to understand something. This isn't a story about money. Not really. It's a story about who shows up when you've got nothing left to offer them. And it's a story about a piece of paper, one single piece of paper, signed 5 years ago at that very same kitchen table, that nobody in my family remembered but me. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. Stories like this one are why I do this. Real human stories about family, betrayal, and the quiet kind of justice that takes its time but always arrives. Do me a favor before we go any further. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends now. Let me back up and take you to the beginning. The house on Buttermilk Ridge Road is the kind of house you buy when you're young and full of plans, thinking you're going to flip it into something bigger someday. Someday never came. The paint's been peeling on the porch rail for years, and I've been meaning to fix the gutter on the east side since 2 summers ago. It was a Tuesday evening in late July, hot enough that the cicadas hadn't even bothered to quiet down after dark, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of mail I didn't want to open. A past due notice from Harpeth Valley Electric. A letter from the insurance company that I already knew wasn't good news, because good news doesn't come in an envelope that thick. That's when Diane's phone rang from the counter. I watched her whole face change. I mean, it changed like somebody flipped a switch behind her eyes. The tiredness gone, the irritation gone, replaced in half a second by a light I hadn't seen pointed in my direction in years. There it is, I thought. The only smile I get to see anymore, and it isn't even for me. Grant. Honey, she practically sang it. Oh my goodness, tell me everything. I set my coffee down. Is that Grant? Let me say hi real quick. She didn't even look at me. She turned her back, actually turned her whole body. Like I was a draft coming through a window she needed to shut, and walked toward the living room with the phone pressed to her ear. A $12 million account? Grant, that's... Oh, I am so proud of you, honey, I really am. You know you get that mind for business straight from my side of the family. Your grandfather could sell ice in January. God rest him. I sat there and listened to my wife of 31 years talk to our son like he just cured something, instead of closing a sales account at his investment firm up in Nashville. I'm not telling you this to sound bitter. I'm telling you because it's the truth, and because you need to understand what normal looked like inside my house before I can make you understand what happened next. She hung up eventually, still smiling, walked back into the kitchen, and the smile dropped off her face the second her eyes landed on me. Like she'd taken off a mask and hung it by the door. He's doing so well, Walter. That's good, I said. And I meant it. Whatever had gone wrong between me and that boy over the years, I never once wished bad on him. Not once. A father doesn't have that in him, or at least this father doesn't. Diane didn't say anything else. She just slid the electric bill across the table toward me. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask about the cough I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, the one I kept blaming on the summer air and the dust at the warehouse. Fix this, she said, please, before they cut it off again, like it was a pattern, like I was the pattern. Now, here's the part where a man telling his own story is supposed to make himself look better than he is. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you the truth, because the truth is harder than anything I could invent, and it's the only thing that matters here. 10 years ago, I wasn't some deadbeat who gambled away his family's savings. I was a real estate investor, a small one, nothing fancy, but I was good at it, and people around Williamson County knew I was good at it. I bought 60 acres of raw land south of Thompson's Station, land that was going to sit right in the path of the State Route 840, outer loop expansion everybody knew was coming. It was the smartest bet of my life, and everybody said so. Diane used to brag about it at church, about her husband with the eye for land. Then an old fuel pipeline running under a neighboring property ruptured. Crude bled into the soil and the groundwater before anybody even knew it had happened. And here's the part people never believe until it happens to them. It didn't matter that the pipeline wasn't mine. It didn't matter that the spill started on somebody else's land. The contamination crossed my property line, and the federal environmental authorities locked down every affected parcel, mine included, under a remediation order, while the pipeline company, its insurers, and 3 different agencies spent a decade in court fighting over who was responsible for the cleanup. I wasn't at fault for one drop of that oil, but fault and consequence are 2 different animals. Until the litigation settled and the site was certified clean, I couldn't sell that land. Couldn't build on it. Couldn't borrow against it. Couldn't do one single thing with it except pay the property taxes every year and watch my credit rating circle the drain. Because every dollar I had was buried in 60 acres of dirt the government had wrapped in red tape. The banks pulled my lines of credit. My business partner walked. And Diane never once asked me if I was okay. She asked me how I was going to fix it. That was 10 years ago. I've been driving a forklift at a distribution warehouse off Highway 96 ever since. 6 days a week most months, coming home smelling like cardboard and diesel, doing honest work that nobody in my own house ever once called honest. And somewhere in those 10 years, my son turned 21 and decided his whole young adulthood had been ruined because his daddy couldn't pay for his junior year spring break trip down to the Gulf. He never forgave me for it, not once. Not even after I sat him down and explained the pipeline, the court fight, the federal order, every last piece of it. In his mind, the details didn't matter. In his mind, I bet big I lost, and he paid the price. Maybe he needed a villain, I used to tell myself. And I was standing right there, wearing a warehouse badge, easy to cast. My daughter is different. Sarah's 26 now. She teaches 4th grade at Longview Elementary, right here in Thompson Station, about 15 minutes from my door. She was 16 when the spill happened. Old enough to remember the bigger house we used to have. Young enough that instead of mourning what we lost, she watched me get up every morning and rebuild something out of nothing. I think that shaped her. I know it shaped how she saw me. She came by 2 nights after that phone call from Grant, carrying a foil pan of chicken and rice. My favorite, made the way my own mother used to make it, heavy on the cumin. She didn't say one word about money or bills or her brother's $12 million. She just set the pan down on the stove, kissed the top of my head like I was the child, and she was the parent, and said, "You still coughing like that, old man?" "It's just allergies, baby." Uh-huh. She didn't believe me. She never did. "You're seeing Dr. Holloway Thursday." I already called. Don't argue with me. I didn't argue. There wasn't much point arguing with Sarah. She'd inherited her stubbornness from somewhere, and I had a strong suspicion it was me. Dr. Holloway wasn't smiling when he came back into that exam room on Thursday. He set the folder down on the counter like it weighed 40 pounds. "Walter, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There's a mass on your lung. It's operable, that's the good news, and I want you to hold on to that. But it needs to come out soon. Weeks, not months." There it is, I thought, the other shoe. 10 years I'd been waiting to hear it drop, and it turned out it wasn't a bank or a lawyer or a tax notice. It was my own body finally sending me a bill. "Okay," I said, because what else does a man say? "So we schedule it." That's when the woman from the billing office came in. Nice enough lady, name of Renee, who looked about as uncomfortable as a human being can look while holding a clipboard. She explained gently, the way you explain things to a man you're about to knock down, that my insurance had a gap in coverage for the specific surgical procedure Dr. Holloway wanted to use. The out-of-pocket portion came to $3,500, and hospital policy required the deposit before the surgical team would book the operating room. "I can look into a payment plan for the balance," Renee said. "But the $3,500 has to come first." "I'm sorry, I truly am. You want to know something funny? There was a time I made more than that in a single week. Now I sat in my truck in that hospital parking lot, a 15-year-old F-150 with the air conditioner barely holding on, and I ran the math 6 different ways, and every single time it came out the same. I didn't have it. My credit was still wrecked from a decade of carrying that land. No bank in Williamson County was going to touch me. $3,500, I thought. And I've got a son with $12 million sitting in an account somewhere. I told myself I wouldn't call him. I told myself that for 2 full days, Then I called him anyway, because that's what a father does. You swallow your pride whole, and you dial your son's number, and you hope, God how you hope, that the boy you raised is still in there somewhere underneath the man he became. He picked up on the fourth ring and I could hear it right away. Glasses clinking. Somebody laughing too loud. A woman's voice saying something about opening another bottle. Dad, hey, can this wait? We're at Ridgetop celebrating the Hendricks account. Grant, I need to talk to you about something serious. Yeah, okay, give me a second. A muffled sound like he'd pressed the phone against his jacket. All right, go. So I told him. All of it. The mass, the surgery, the gap in the coverage. The $3,500 I needed by the end of the week, or they wouldn't put me on the schedule. And when I finished, there was a pause, a long one, long enough that for one stupid, hopeful second I thought, maybe. Maybe. Dad, his voice went flat, cold. I just spent 10 years digging myself out of the hole your bad investments put this family in. You know how hard I worked to get where I am. And now you want me to throw my money into, what? More of your bad planning? Grant, this isn't about the land. This is surgery. You brought this on yourself, Dad. You always do. Ask the hospital for a payment plan. That's what they're for. A pause. And then quieter, meaner, the part I'll hear in my head until the day I die. I've got a reputation to protect now. I can't keep carrying your dead weight. The line went dead. Just like that. My son hung up on me while I was sitting in a hospital parking lot with a death sentence in my chest so he could get back to his bottle. I called Diane next, told her everything, asked if maybe she could talk to him, soften him up mother to son. Don't you dare ruin this for him, she snapped. He worked hard to get away from all this, from your mess. Rachel's got a stable job, doesn't she? Go ask her, Rachel. She meant Sarah. 31 years of marriage, 26 years of raising that girl, and my wife still reached for the wrong name when she was too busy being angry to think straight. That told me everything about where our daughter ranked in that woman's mind. Somewhere below the son with the money, and somewhere below getting the name right. I hung up and sat in my truck in that parking lot for a long, long time. I didn't cry. I was past crying by then. I just sat there thinking about how a man can spend his whole life trying to hand his family the world, and end up alone in a 15-year-old pickup outside a hospital, doing arithmetic that never comes out right. I met Sarah 2 days later at the Copper Kettle Diner off Highway 96. The kind of place with vinyl booths gone soft in the middle, and a waitress named Wanda who calls everybody hun. I hadn't planned on telling her. I swear to you I hadn't. I was going to smile, eat my catfish, and let my daughter believe her old man was fine. She knew before I said a word. She always knew. Dad, she set her fork down. What's wrong? Tell me right now. So I told her. And I want you to understand the shame of that moment. The shame of a 58-year-old man sitting across from his 26-year-old daughter, a schoolteacher who couldn't have more than a few $1,000s to her name, about to ask her for money her own brother had refused without blinking. The words wouldn't even form right in my mouth. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Sarah reached into her bag and set an envelope on the table between us. Then she turned her phone around so I could see the screen. A notification from a lending company. Approved. $1,500. Dad, stop talking. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't shake at all. There's $2,000 in cash in that envelope. I sold the Civic this morning. My throat closed up like a fist. You sold your car? Cars can be replaced, Dad. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, hard. The way you grab something you have decided you are not going to let go of. You can't. I'll take the bus to school for a while. It's fine. I probably need the exercise anyway. I sat in that booth and I wept, openly, helplessly, in front of Wanda and half the lunch crowd at the Copper Kettle. And my daughter, the one who didn't have $12 million, the one nobody ever bragged about on the phone, held my hand across a Formica table and told me I was going to be okay. She's the only one who ever really saw me, I thought. The only one who ever saw me at all. I had no idea, sitting in that diner, how much that moment was about to matter. I had no idea what was still waiting for me out on 60 acres of dead land south of town. But that's the next part of the story. Stay with me. A letter showed up at my daughter's apartment while I was still healing from a surgery I almost couldn't afford. And that letter was worth more than every dollar my son ever refused me. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second, because I sat with it for 3 days before I told a single living soul. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to understand what it cost to get to that letter. They wheeled me into pre-op at 6 in the morning on a Thursday in early August, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia pulled me under was Sarah's face, right up close to mine, her hands wrapped around my fingers. "You're going to be fine, old man," she said. "I already told the nurses you're stubborn as a mule. They said that's good. Stubborn people heal faster." Where did she learn to be this brave, I thought. 26 years old and steadier than I've ever been in my whole life. Then the lights went out. I woke up 11 hours later with a tube down my throat and a pain in my chest, like somebody had parked a truck on it. Dr. Holloway came by that evening, still in his scrubs, and leaned down close so I could hear him over the beeping. "We got it all, Walter. Clean margins, you did good. I didn't cry. I didn't have the strength to cry. I just lay there and thought about Sarah's little Civic sitting on some dealer's lot with a different family's name on the title. And I thought, she bought me this. Not the hospital, not the insurance company. My daughter bought me this morning, and every morning I get after it, with a $1,500 loan and a car she needed to get to work. I'm going to make this right, I promised myself, lying there in the dark with the monitors blinking. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if I'm 80. I am going to make this right. I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 2 weeks recovering on the pull-out couch in Sarah's apartment, because my own house was empty most days, and I wasn't about to lie there alone, listening to my own breathing. Diane hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went. 16 days, no message. I stopped checking. Sarah's place was a small one-bedroom not far from her school. The kind of apartment where you can hear the upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling every night. She had her new bus schedule taped to the refrigerator with a little apple-shaped magnet from her classroom, right next to a photo of the two of us at a 4th of July picnic from years back. Her handwriting in the corner of that schedule, Route 4, 6:40 a.m. I looked at that bus schedule every single morning. Every single one. She's out there right now, I'd think, standing at a bus stop in this August heat, because she sold her car for me, while her brother drives a leased German sedan to a steakhouse to celebrate bonuses he'll burn through in 6 months. That thought sat on my chest heavier than the surgical scar did. She'd come home from school every afternoon still in her teacher clothes, smelling like dry erase markers and cafeteria pizza, and she'd check my incision and heat up something simple for dinner. She wasn't much of a cook, my Sarah, but Lord, she tried. She'd sit with me and watch whatever detective show was on, and never once, not one single time, did she complain. Never brought up the car, never asked when I'd pay her back, never sighed in a way she wanted me to hear. That's the difference. I remember thinking one night, watching her fall asleep sitting up in a kitchen chair, still in her work clothes, a stack of ungraded spelling tests in her lap. Grant gives so people will see him giving. Sarah gives and doesn't even register it as giving. To her, it's just love, plain and ordinary, the way breathing is ordinary. It was a Tuesday, 16 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked instead of just leaving the mail in the box. Sarah was at school. I answered the door in my robe, still moving slow, still tender across the ribs. "Got something certified here," the carrier said. "Need a signature. 2 of them, actually. 2 letters. One from an outfit whose name I didn't recognize at first, Harpeth Ridge Development, and one with a return address I knew instantly, because I'd been getting mail from them for 10 straight years, the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Here we go, I thought. Another update, another form letter. The cleanup is ongoing. Do not disturb the site. Do not sell. Do not build. Do not breathe near it. I almost set it on the counter and shuffled back to the couch. But something, I still can't tell you what, made me sit down at Sarah's little kitchen table and tear it open right then. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Remediation complete. Site released from federal oversight, effective July 14th. The responsible party's settlement had funded the final phase of cleanup. The order that had strangled my land for a decade was lifted. Done. Released, clean, 10 years. 10 years of property taxes on dirt I couldn't touch. 10 years of my credit rotting in the gutter for a spill I didn't cause. 10 years of my own wife looking at me like I was a stain on the family name. And there it was in black and white, on government letterhead, like it was nothing at all. I set that letter down on the table like it might go off if I moved too fast. Then I opened the second one, Harpeth Ridge Development. And this is where you need to remember the bet I made 10 years ago. Because while my 60 acres sat locked behind a federal order, the State Route 840 outer loop expansion I'd staked everything on had gone ahead and happened anyway. Right past my property line, 60 acres that used to be worthless bottomland with an oil stain under it, now sat less than half a mile from a brand new interchange, freshly zoned commercial, surrounded by exactly the kind of growth I'd predicted a decade too early. The letter was an offer, a real one, signed with financing letters attached, not some lowball feeler from a land speculator. $15 million, cash, 30-day close. I read that number probably 20 times. I'd like to tell you I whooped and hollered and ran around that little apartment like a man half my age. I didn't. I sat very, very still in a borrowed robe at my daughter's kitchen table, with my ribs aching, and I did not move for a long time. $15 million, I thought. And 3 weeks ago I was crying in a diner because I couldn't come up with 3,500. Then I looked up, and my eyes landed right back where they always landed. The bus schedule on the refrigerator. The Apple magnet. My daughter's handwriting. Route 4, 6:40 a.m. Because she'd had to memorize a whole new commute at 26 years old to save her father's life. She's standing at a bus stop in the Tennessee heat right now, I thought. And I'm sitting in her kitchen holding $15 million. And that is the exact moment something inside me went quiet and cold and very, very clear. I did not call Diane. I did not call Grant. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody. I just couldn't find one single reason to report good news to people who had told me, in their own words, in the same month, that my problems were not their problems. Why would I call them? 3 weeks earlier, they'd made it perfectly clear whose problem I was. I picked up my phone and called somebody else instead. Arthur Combs, said the voice on the other end. Arthur had handled my business affairs back before the spill. One of the only professionals who stuck around after everything fell apart. Mostly, I think, because even broke I paid him what little I owed him on time, every time. A man remembers who does that. Arthur, it's Walter. Walter, good Lord, how are you feeling? Sarah told my wife the surgery went well. Arthur, I need you to look at some paperwork for me today. Today, if you can. Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a social call. What's going on? I told him all of it. The EPA release. The Harpeth Ridge offer. The number. There was a pause on the line long enough that I thought the call had dropped. 15 million, he finally said. Walter, that changes everything. I know it does. I looked at the bus schedule one more time. And that's exactly why I need you to pull something else for me first, before we touch that offer. You remember a document Diane had you draw up about 5 years back? Arthur went very quiet, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Slower, more careful. The voice of a man choosing his words the way you choose your footing on ice. The property and liability partition, he said. The one your son pushed for. A pause. Walter, I told Diane at the time I didn't love that document. But I'll say this now, and you'd best sit down if you're not sitting. Depending on what that offer says, that agreement she signed may matter a great deal more today than it did the day she signed it. Pull the original, Arthur, and read me exactly what it says. Word for word, don't leave out a syllable. Arthur called me back 2 hours later, and I could hear papers shuffling on his end of the line. Walter, I'm going to read you the operative language. Ready? He cleared his throat. Diane Briggs hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest or right, legal or equitable, in and to the real property located in Williamson County described herein, including any proceeds, appreciation, or value realized therefrom, regardless of cause. Regardless of cause. Arthur, I said, real slow, does that partition agreement mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up 5 years ago, Walter. She wanted the house and her retirement accounts protected from your land debt. So she partitioned the marital estate. She took the house and her accounts as her sole separate property, and she required you to take 100% of that land, and every liability attached to it, as your sole separate property. It was legally binding the day it was notarized. Whatever happens to that land now, good, bad, or a $15 million buyout, she signed away every legal claim to it. In writing, with her own attorney advising her. Grant was the one who pushed her into it, wasn't he? He set the meeting up. He sat right there at the table and signed as a witness. Arthur exhaled slow into the phone. Told her it was the smart move. Told her it would shield her credit if the land ever got seized. A dry little laugh came down the line. Well, it was smart, all right. Just not in the direction he thought he was being smart. I sat there at Sarah's kitchen table, with the afternoon sun coming through those thin apartment blinds, and for the first time in 10 years I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame, and wasn't grief. It was clarity. Pure, cold, weightless clarity. 5 years ago, my wife and my son had sat me down at my own kitchen table. Scared, they said, genuinely scared that the bank would come after the family's assets because of my land debt. And on Grant's advice, with Grant's signature as witness, Diane had legally cut herself loose from that land forever, not just from its debts. From it, from everything it was and everything it might ever become. Regardless of cause, they hadn't just abandoned me on that sinking ship. They had signed a document swearing they'd never held a ticket. Arthur, I said, I want to move on the Harpeth Ridge offer. And I want it quiet, not a soul outside this phone call knows until it's done. Not Diane, not Grant. Especially not Diane and Grant. Understood. And the proceeds? I looked over at that bus schedule one more time. Route 4, 6:40 a.m. You draw up whatever needs drawing up. I want the sale closed and I want an irrevocable trust set up right alongside it. In Sarah's name. Arthur didn't say anything for a second. All of it, Walter. The whole 15 million? Every dime left after my debts are cleared. And my voice didn't shake, not even a little. That surprised me more than anything else that whole strange day. She sold her car for me, Arthur. She took out a loan at an interest rate that ought to be a crime so I could get on an operating table. She's been riding a city bus at 6:40 in the morning for weeks so her father would have a place to heal. I had to stop. My throat had gone tight. Meanwhile, my son told me to ask the hospital for a payment plan, and my wife told me not to ruin his celebration. So no, I will not be splitting this 3 ways for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened. Fair happened in a booth at the Copper Kettle Diner 3 weeks ago, and only one of my children showed up for it. I hear you, Walter. I'll have the paperwork ready by Friday. One more thing, Arthur. When the trust buys her a house, and it will, my name doesn't go anywhere near the deed. The trust owns everything outright. I don't want 1 square inch of this that anybody can drag into a courtroom later. I want it airtight. You understand me? Airtight, Arthur said. I understand completely. I hung up the phone and sat a long while in that quiet apartment, listening to the window unit hum, looking at a bus schedule stuck to a refrigerator with a classroom magnet. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they won't come here asking how I'm feeling. They'll come asking about the money. That's just who they are now. Maybe it's who they've always been. And I spent 30 years refusing to see it. I wasn't wrong about that. I want you to hold on to that thought, because it's exactly what happened. But not the way I expected, and not for the reason I expected. See, I assumed Grant and Diane would show up because they'd caught wind of the land. But they didn't know a thing about the land yet on the night they finally came pounding on Sarah's door, 8 days after the sale closed. They came because Grant was drowning in a mess of his own making, and he needed money so badly that he was willing to walk into the one place on this earth he'd sworn he'd never set foot. His broke, embarrassing father's temporary bedroom on his little sister's pull-out couch. He had no idea what was waiting for him there, neither did Diane, but I did. I'd had 8 days to get ready. If you've been listening this long, I know this story has its hooks in you. So while it's fresh, drop your thoughts in the comments, tap that like button, and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next in that little apartment is the reason I'm telling this story at all. 8 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Arthur and hearing that first hard knock on Sarah's door. 8 days to sign what needed signing, wire what needed wiring, and sit with the strangest feeling I'd known in a decade. Patience that didn't hurt. I'd like to tell you I spent those 8 days rehearsing some grand speech. I didn't. Mostly I healed. I walked a little farther every morning, down to the end of the complex and back, then around the block, then 2. I sat on Sarah's little balcony in the evenings and watched the sun go down over the parking lot, thinking about 60 acres of land that had finally, after 10 years, stopped punishing me for a crime I never committed. Then that Wednesday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door like they were trying to knock it off its hinges. Dad, open up! I know you're in there. Grant's voice. Loud and frayed at the edges in a way I had never once heard from him. This wasn't the smooth, satisfied Grant from the steakhouse phone call. Something else was underneath it now. Something with teeth. Sarah got to the door before I did, still in her school clothes, and pulled it open with a look on her face I recognized. The exact look she must give 9-year-olds who are one bad decision away from the principal's office. You want to explain why you're pounding on my door like the police? Grant pushed straight past her without answering. Diane came in right behind him, arms crossed, face set hard as poured concrete. And I want you to picture what I saw from that couch. My son, 31 years old, in a wrinkled dress shirt, with the tie yanked loose, sweat on his collar even though the air conditioning was running. My wife behind him, chin up, eyes cold, and neither one of them, I want this on the record, neither one of them looked at me and asked how I was healing. Not one word about the surgery, not one glance at the scar still tender under my shirt. Dad. Grant's voice cracked just slightly right in the middle of the word. We need to talk now. There it is, I thought. Not how are you feeling. Not I'm sorry I hung up on you in a hospital parking lot. Straight to business, same as always. Sit down, Grant, I said. You look like you're about to have a medical emergency of your own. He didn't sit, he paced. I was in the county commercial registry today. For work. His voice was shaking now. Harpeth Ridge Development logged a deed memorandum this week. A 60-acre parcel south of Thompson Station. Your dirt, Dad. The title history got flagged because of the waiver Mom signed 5 years ago. $15 million, cash. You sold it, didn't you? Diane's mouth actually fell open. 15, Walter, is that true? So that's how they found out, I thought. Not from me. From a county registry. That's almost funny, in a sick sort of way. The son who wouldn't take my phone call found out about my miracle from a database. It's true, I said, as calm as I could manage. Closed 9 days ago. 9 days. Grant's voice climbed an octave. You've had $15 million for 9 days and you didn't call me? Your own son? I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. The last time I called you, Grant, you were at a steakhouse celebrating a commission while I sat in a hospital parking lot, trying to figure out how to pay for cancer surgery. You told me my problems weren't your problems. You told me you couldn't keep carrying my dead weight, so no. It didn't occur to me to call you the second something good happened either. That should have been the moment he softened. Any man with anything left in him would have softened. He didn't. You hid this from us. His finger came up, jabbing at the air between us like he could make the words truer by pointing. You knew the cleanup was finishing. You knew that land was about to be worth something. You made us live like we were broke this whole time. Mom drove a 10-year-old Camry. Dad, a 10-year-old Camry. While you sat on a fortune, just so you could hand it all to your favorite the second it paid off. He actually believes it, I thought, watching him. He's rewriting 10 years of history in real time, right in front of me, and he believes every single word coming out of his own mouth. That's the part that frightened me, not the anger, the sincerity. Grant. My voice came out quieter than his, and somehow that made the whole room go quieter too. I did not know that land was worth a dime until 16 days after my surgery. I found out sitting on your sister's pull-out couch, recovering from an operation she paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I never hid a fortune from this family. What I hid for 10 straight years was how scared I was. Because every time I tried to talk about it, your mother told me to go fix the electric bill, and you told me I ruined your 20s. Diane stepped forward then, arms still crossed, chin still up. Don't you dare stand there and play the victim, Walter. I stood by you for 31 years, while you dragged this family through the mud with your real estate disasters. That money belongs to this family. You are being vindictive, you are being cruel, you are being stingy. Grant finished for her. You're being stingy, Dad, and it's disgusting. Stingy. I almost laughed out loud. A man who refused his father $3,500 for cancer surgery, standing in his sister's kitchen, calling his father stingy over $15 million. We're not asking anymore, Grant said, and here is where his voice really changed. Dropped low, went smooth again. The voice of a man who believes he is about to win. Mom's filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Irreconcilable differences. Financial abandonment. The works. My lawyer is already drafting a motion to freeze every account connected to that sale, until the courts sort out an equitable division. You concealed marital assets, Dad. That's not a gray area. That's fraud. He slammed his hand flat on Sarah's kitchen table. The same table where, weeks earlier, My daughter had slid an envelope of everything she had across to me without a second thought. You're going to be tied up in litigation so long you won't have a cent left by the time we're done. My lawyers will bury you. I glanced at Sarah, standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. That's my daughter's table, I thought. And he just brought his fist down on it like he owns the place. Like he owns every room he walks into. I looked at Grant for a long moment. Then at Diane. Then I stood up, slow, careful, still tender across the ribs, and reached into my jacket pocket. You want to talk about lawyers, Grant? I said. All right, let's talk about lawyers. I pulled out 2 folded documents. I slid the first one across the table to Diane. You remember this, Diane? She looked down at it, and I watched the color start draining out of her face before she'd finished the first paragraph. 5 years ago, I said, you and Grant sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared, genuinely scared, I'll grant you that the bank was going to come after the family's assets because of my land debt. Grant's idea, by the way, his brilliant idea. He told you it was smart, told you it would protect your credit if the debt ever swallowed the property. So you had Arthur draw up a partition and exchange agreement. You took the house and your retirement accounts as your sole separate property, and you legally required me to take 100% of that land and every liability crawling on it as my sole separate property. I tapped the paper, gentle as I could manage, because there was no satisfaction in me, none, watching her hands begin to tremble. Read it again, Diane. It doesn't say debt. It says regardless of cause. You didn't just protect yourself from my failure. Under the law of this state, you converted that land into my separate property, and you signed away every future claim to its value, regardless of cause, just to keep your hands clean of my debt. Your own lawyer explained every word of it to you before you signed. And Grant sat right there and signed as the witness. Grant's face had gone pale too, but he wasn't done. That boy was never done. That doesn't matter, he snapped. I'll still take you to court. On what grounds, Grant? I slid the second document across the table to him. Take a good look at that before you finish the sentence. He looked down. It was a bank statement. Sarah's bank statement. $12, I said. That's what was in your sister's checking account 3 weeks ago. $12, Grant. Because she sold her car and took out a loan at 22% interest so that I could get on an operating table. While you were ordering $300 bottles to celebrate a commission, your sister was standing at a bus stop at 6:40 in the morning, so she'd have enough left over to keep teaching 4th graders long division for $41,000 a year. I let that sit in the room. The window unit hummed. Somewhere upstairs, the neighbor's television bled through the ceiling, the way it had every night for 3 weeks. You want to talk about court, son? Go ahead. Bring your lawyers. Bring every lawyer in Williamson County. But before you do, you go on and explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of an asset your mother waived in writing 5 years ago, on your advice, with your signature on the witness line. And while you're at it, explain to that judge where you were the night your father needed $3,500 for cancer surgery, and where your sister was. Nobody said anything for a long moment. I didn't hide this money from you, I said, and my voice finally came down soft. Tired, done. I found out about the land's release sitting right here, on that pull-out couch, 16 days after surgery. The sale took 30 days to close. The trust was finalized last week. I kept it quiet for one reason only. I needed the time to make certain every dollar of it went to the only person in this family who actually earned it. But I want you both to understand something, and I want you to carry it with you when you leave. Even if I had known sooner, even if I'd had years of warning, it would not change one single thing about this moment. I looked at Diane first, then at Grant. You two divorced yourselves from this family a long time ago. You just never got around to filing the paperwork. Well, it turns out you did file it 5 years ago, at my kitchen table. The trust is already finalized, I went on. Irrevocable. The full amount, every dollar after my debts were cleared, belongs to Sarah. All of it. The first thing Arthur did the morning it funded was wire a payoff to that predatory lender and burn her loan contract to ash. Then the trust paid off the title on this building, so she doesn't owe a dime of rent while her new house is being finished. It funded the after-school tutoring program she's been trying to start for 3 years for kids whose parents can't afford it. And there's a car waiting on her. Nicer than the Civic she sold, though she's going to fuss at me about that, because that's who she is. I folded my hands on the table. You're both officially free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you always wanted? For 10 years I've listened to how I ruined this family with my failures. Well, congratulations. The failure's over. And the two of you signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my wife did not have a single word. Grant just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like the numbers might rearrange themselves if he glared hard enough. Now get out of my daughter's home, I said. Quiet. Final. Both of you. They left in a silence I had never once heard from either of them in 31 years of marriage and 31 years of raising that boy. No slammed door, no last word. Just two people walking out of a little apartment, realizing in real time that the very cleverness Grant had always been so proud of, the legal maneuver he talked his own mother into, was the exact instrument that had locked them both out of a fortune neither of them would ever touch. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around her, careful of my ribs, and we stood there a minute in that little apartment that wouldn't be hers much longer. Not because she was losing it, but because for the first time in her life she was finally getting more than she ever asked anybody for. Cars can be replaced, she'd told me months before, sliding an envelope across a diner table. You can't, she'd been right about that. And it turned out I couldn't be replaced either. Not to her. And in the end, that was worth more than any number, Harpeth Ridge Development, ever printed on a piece of paper. Now I could end the story right there. Most men would. The wicked got what they had coming. The good got what they deserved. Roll the credits. But I'm 58 years old. I've had a surgeon's hands inside my chest. And I've learned that the ending of a story is not the same thing as the meaning of it. So give me a few more minutes, because this last part is the reason I sat down to tell you any of this at all. In the months after that night, people around town heard pieces of the story, the way people always do, and every single one of them wanted to talk about the money. $15 million. The land. The twist of that document. But here's what I've come to understand, sitting on the porch of the little guest cottage behind Sarah's new place, watching her tutoring kids come and go on Saturday mornings with their backpacks and their multiplication flashcards. The money was never the story. The money was just the light that finally got switched on in a room my family had been sitting in the dark, for 30 years. Because the truth is, Grant didn't become the man he is on the night he refused me $3,500. And Diane didn't become who she is on the night she told me to go ask our daughter instead. Those were just the moments the mask came all the way off. The refusal was decades in the making, built one small dismissal at a time, one turn back at a time, one wrong name at a time. And I let it be built. That's my share of the blame, and I'll carry it honestly. Every time I fixed the bill instead of asking why I was the only one who had to, every time I swallowed a cruelty to keep the peace, I taught the people I loved that I would cost them nothing. Hear me on this, because it took me cancer and a miracle to learn it. When you teach people that your dignity is negotiable, don't be surprised at how little they offer for it. And the second thing I learned is this. Love is not what people say at Thanksgiving. Love is not pride in your accomplishments. And it is certainly not a smile that switches on for one phone call and off for another. Love is arithmetic done in the dark, where no one is watching and no credit is given. It's a 26-year-old schoolteacher doing the math on a car she needs and a father she needs more, and never once, not for a second, showing you what it cost her. If you want to know who truly loves you, don't look at who celebrates you when you're up. Look at who shows up when you have nothing left to offer them but the ability to say thank you. Every person watching this has both kinds of people in their life. Count them honestly. It might be the most important accounting you ever do. The third thing is harder to say, so I'll just say it plain. I did not give Sarah that money to punish her brother. I know how it looks, and I know how it felt to him. But vengeance is a meal that goes cold the moment it's served. I stood in that kitchen, I watched their faces fall, and I promise you there was no feast in it, only the flat gray relief of a door finally closed. What I did was simpler than revenge. I directed a harvest to the hands that had done the planting. That's not cruelty. That's just the oldest justice there is. And the last thing. People ask me if the door is closed forever. Diane's divorce went through. She got her house and her accounts, exactly what she chose 5 years ago, no more and no less. Grant, I hear, is still in Nashville, still chasing accounts, a little quieter at parties now. I have not spoken to either of them since that night. But I'll tell you what I told Sarah when she asked me the same question. If the day ever comes that my son knocks on a door of mine asking how I'm feeling instead of what I'm holding, if he ever comes carrying nothing but himself, that door will open. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not holding a grudge either, because a grudge is just another piece of land you pay taxes on and can never build a thing upon. I gave 10 years to one of those already. I don't have 10 more to waste. So no, this was never a story about money. It's a story about who shows up. Sarah shows up. She showed up with chicken and rice. She showed up with an envelope and $12 left to her name. She showed up at a bus stop at 6:40 in the morning and never called it a sacrifice. All I did, the land, the trust, the house, all $15 million of it, all I did was finally, after 26 years, show up for her. If this story moved something in you, do an old man a kindness. Hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And share this one with somebody who needs to hear it. And down in the comments, tell me this. Who is the person in your life who showed up when you had nothing to offer them? Tell me where you're watching from, too. I read every comment, and I will see you in the next story. What you've just heard is a work of storytelling. A fictional dramatization written, shaped, and told by a human being, drawing on the truths of real family wounds without pointing at any real family. Names, places, and events are products of imagination. If pieces of it felt familiar to you, that's not because it's your story. It's because, in one way or another, it's all of ours. Take care of the people who show up for you. Good night.